The 5 New Orleans Saints that can help the team right the ship this weekend by writing their own. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. On today's episode, it's Film Watch Wednesday, so we're going to wrap up the show with taking a look at what a return of Michael Thomas and or Jarvis Landry would have done for the Saints last weekend, and more importantly, what it does for them this weekend if they can get either one of those guys back. Bradley Roby has been moved to the slot. The Saints starting slot corner has been moved to injured reserve, So who is it that mans the slot? The Saints have 3 options. We'll break them all down. But first, I want to start off with 5 New Orleans Saints that need to step up Sunday. The 5 New Orleans Saints that could potentially help to right the ship by writing their own. And we're going to start off with a little bit of a doozy here, maybe. I don't know. I don't think this is a stretch at all. But I'm going to start off with a New Orleans Saint that's not necessarily on the field, but on the sideline, and it's head coach Dennis Allen. This isn't to say that Dennis Allen is on the hot seat, or if he loses this game that he might be on his way out or anything like that. But this is just simply to say that Dennis Allen took a lot of kind of accountability over the course of this weekend after the Thursday night loss, kind of putting it back on the coaching staff and saying, hey, we've got to go in and do, this kind of like deep cleanse, this kind of, real deep dive into what's been going on the first 7 weeks of the season. How do we fix it moving forward? That kind of became their responsibility over the course of the weekend. They gave the team, the personnel, the players some time off. They get back to practice later on today, but they were at the facility on Monday. So the team has been working to sort of figure out where they need to iron out all of the wrinkles and everything like that. So for Dennis Allen, this is kind of a prove it moment for him. Can you help change the course of where this team is? He's had experience doing it before. A couple of seasons ago, the Saints dealt with something like this where they got off to, an 0-2, 0-3 type of start and still made the playoffs. He mentioned his time as the defensive coordinator with the Denver Broncos, starting off 2-5, watching the San Francisco 49ers start off similarly, but still make it to the playoffs last year. So there's still some examples out there of teams being able to turn things around. But are the New Orleans Saints those teams? Can they get it done? It all starts with coaching. It all starts and ends with the head coach. So for Dennis Allen, this is a real opportunity for him to be able to come out against the team that dismissed him years ago after going 8-28 as their head coach. He now has an opportunity this weekend to really, really prove something. So you want to talk about somebody that has an opportunity here and can step up. It's head coach Dennis Allen doing the thing that everyone expected him to be able to do going into this season, which is put a stout defense on the field, an offense that's able to at least complement what the defense is able to do and win games in New Orleans. Those are the things that were the expectation. Can Dennis Allen do it? He'll have to step up and prove it this weekend. Another player that hasn't necessarily been the full-on representation or the full-on meeting of the expectations that were put on him early on in the season, though I do think that the slack is a little bit heavy because he's under such a magnifying glass, is safety Tyrann Mathieu. Now look, he's got 5 missed tackles so far, which leads the team. He has only had, I think it's 8 in the past 2 seasons, not combined, but in each of the last 2 seasons. So he's less than halfway through with this season, but more than halfway to his previous totals. That's just over a 12% missed tackle rate. And I think the biggest thing about this is that 5 missed tackles at this point in the season really isn't that bad, but it is sort of the big missed tackles happening in big moments. One helping to turn into a 67-yard touchdown by Laviska Shenault, another helping to turn into a 60-yard touchdown by Jamar Chase. Both of those helping to kind of put the opposing team over the top in terms of the contest, and then those teams winning those games. So I think it's kind of the the big moments where you expected Tyron Matthew to kind of show up and be a difference maker in your favor. He does have the only interception so far this season for the Saints defense, but it happened in another country. It didn't even happen on American soil. But, when you look at where he has been sort of on the big moments, unfortunately, he's been on the wrong side of those plays. Now, can he get back to the right side of them? He's allowing only a 50.4 passer rating when targeted. So he's been great in coverage. The next piece is just getting sort of that tackling, that support from that safety position. And before anything even gets to Tyrann Mathieu at safety, there's two other players actually on the defensive line that we should look at to step up this weekend. One of which being David Onyemata, who's on pace right now to only have 12 pressures this season. And his average depth of tackle is 4 yards downfield. For an interior defensive lineman, that means that, particularly in the run game, on run plays, they're getting behind you. And so you've got to be able to make stops. This is the furthest in terms of average depth of tackle away from the line of scrimmage on the defensive interior for the New Orleans Saints. No one else so far is beyond 3 on the interior. And he has never been, David Onyemata, beyond 3 yards average depth of tackle so far in his career. So this is big for him to be already into that 4-yard average depth of target area. Got to close that up. And you have to be able to help this defensive line eliminate the run game. That way, your 2 linebackers and one of your safeties aren't leading the team in tackles, which is what's happening right now. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that those running backs are getting to the second and third levels. The other player on the defensive line that you're looking to step up this weekend is going to be Marcus Davenport. He is leading the team right now when it comes to pressures, right? He's got 20 total pressures on the season so far, but he only has a half sack on the season as well. So you're seeing a lot of that almost there, but not necessarily getting there and being able to make the play. He himself also has a 3.2 average depth of tackle as well. So again, making tackles 3 yards downfield as opposed to those kind of behind the line of scrimmage tackles, those at the line of scrimmage tackles, not allowing the offensive line to move you off of your spot, which is happening to both Marcus Davenport, David Onyemata, and really a lot of the New Orleans Saints defensive line in the run game. He does, Marcus Davenport, have the 11th best win rate amongst all edge rushers with at least 160 pass rushing snaps so far this season. That's across the entire NFL. So he's winning. He's just not getting home. You want to see that change up against Derek Carr, who's not the most mobile quarterback and who Dennis Allen knows really, really well. You got to be able to get home against this Las Vegas front. Jumping over to the offensive side, and to wrap us up before I give you a little bit of lagniappe on this one, it's going to be tight end Juwan Johnson. And I would throw wide receiver Rashid Shaheed in here as well. I don't think that it's necessarily that they need to step up, but more so that they need to be in position to continue stepping up, because both of them have stepped up over the course of the past couple of weeks. Juwan Johnson with 2 receiving touchdowns last week. Rashid Shaheed has touched the ball twice and has scored twice. Dennis Allen said on WWL radio yesterday that they had some more plays that were dialed up for Rashid Shaheed, but the defense did a good job of taking it away. Great to hear. Now keep leaning into those things, right? You have an explosive playmaker, and you have a sure-handed tight end that you can utilize a ton in the passing game. Put them in position so that they can continue to step up. Again, not necessarily that they haven't been stepping up, but now that they're in position to do it, continue to put them in that position. And just a little bit of lagniappe for you. This team also has to get Alvin Kamara in the end zone. Alvin Kamara has got to score a touchdown in this game. It's kind of like a shooter's flow in a way, right? Like once you see the ball go in the basket, then all of a sudden you're starting to feel a lot better out on the basketball court. Same thing for Alvin Kamara. Get him in the end zone, get him feeling really good about what it is that he's producing, because he is producing, but you got to reward him on the back end, particularly in the red zone where he can be such a difference maker. So those are the 5 Saints that I think can and need to step up this Sunday in order to get a win against the Las Vegas Raiders. Coming up next, Bradley Roby is now on injured reserve. The Saints starting corner, starting slot corner. Saints also traded away CJ Gardner-Johnson earlier this offseason. So who's going to man the slot this weekend? We'll go over the Saints' 3 options, and I'll tell you which one I would go with as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we talk about that job, let's talk about your jobs. In particular, if you're looking to hire to add people to your job or to your small business, LinkedIn Jobs is the place to go, because LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the quality candidates that you're wanting to talk to faster, allows you to put together a bunch of different hiring tools like screening questions, things like that to make sure you're talking to the folks that have the requisite experience and talent and skills that you're looking for without having to kind of like go through, all these other people that might be unqualified, all of that. LinkedIn helps you kind of cull all of that to make sure you're getting those quality candidates right off the bat. You can even put up your little hashtag hiring frame on your LinkedIn profile to help spread the word that you are hiring. Small businesses have voted LinkedIn number one when it comes to delivering those high quality candidates versus leading competitors. So don't waste any time here. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And now I get to tell you about legitimately my favorite shop when it comes to sweatpants, joggers, pants, shorts, whatever it is that you're looking for. Bird Dogs, who just recently added sweatpants, by the way, absolutely awesome. I have a pair of the joggers, pair of the shorts. Love them both, wear them all the time. I'm going to start golfing here soon. Me and Jake Madison going to hit the links here in a little bit and stuff. I'm going to be wearing these out on the golf course every chance that I get. I absolutely love these pants. So it doesn't matter if you're somebody that's like in Florida or if you're like 10 degrees in New England or Chicago or anything like that, you're going to be able to get these pants that have built-in liners to help keep you warm. They're super comfortable. And I'm telling you, they're the most comfortable in existence. Doesn't get any better than this. So go and check it out for yourself. Go to birddogs.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, and they're going to throw in a free Bird Dogs rope hat. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it right at the bottom of the screen. That's birddogs.com, promo code LOCKEDON, and boom, a free Bird Dogs rope hat with your pair of Bird Dogs, the most comfortable shorts, pants, sweatpants with built-in liners. You will not take these things off, I promise you. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. The New Orleans Saints have gone from one of the league's deepest secondaries, a secondary so deep that they were totally okay trading away CJ Gardner-Johnson, but now they have been depleted. But there are ways to manage this secondary as it is. That's what we're discussing here. I appreciate you so much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Make sure you also go and check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, all the news you need from around the world of sports. Around 22 minutes or so, including take of the day, big game recaps, everything that you're looking for. Find it wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Odyssey, and of course, anywhere else that you get your podcasts. So the New Orleans Saints are dealing with a lot of injuries on the secondary. Thursday night, they had already gone into the game without Marshon Lattimore. Paulson Adebo was not able to go. They had to start Alontae Taylor on the outside, Bradley Roby opposite him, Chris Harris Jr. in the slot. And that was Chris Harris Jr.'s third game day elevation from the practice squad. I'll tell you why that's important here in just a moment. Bradley Roby sustained an ankle injury after stepping on the back of Rondale Moore's foot about 5 defensive snaps into the game. He's now been put on injured reserve and is going to miss at least 4 games. So that leaves, several big question marks in the secondary, right? Is Marshon Lattimore going to be healthy and ready to go against the Las Vegas Raiders? Will Paulson Adebo be back against the Raiders? Will Alontae Taylor see a larger role against the Raiders? And one of those possible roles for him could be the answer to the question that everyone's asking right now, which is who mans the slot for the New Orleans Saints? The fact of the matter is that the Saints have 3 options here. And some of it is going to be dictated by the health of Marshon Lattimore and Paulson Adebo. So let's move forward as if Marshon Lattimore and Paulson Adebo will play this weekend. We'll move forward as if that's the case. So really what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out who's going to play in the slot. Your 3 options are Alontae Taylor, as we just discussed, Chris Harris Jr., who's been playing that role for you for, the past little bit, and then Justin Evans. So let's break each of these down. We'll start with Justin Evans, who was kind of a training camp star, started off really well early on in the season, has kind of had some kind of ups and downs over the course of the past few games since then. He's played the most amount of snaps in the slot for the New Orleans Saints so far this season at 77. It's a lot of S's in that sentence. He's allowed 15 catches on 20 targets for 165 yards and a touchdown, a 115.6 passer rating when targeted. Not fantastic. Like I said, he started off really strong early on in the season against the Falcons, even carried that on a little bit against the Bucs, had a nice game against the Bucs, his former team. But then after that, things have kind of been impacted by Marcus May being out, Paulson Adebo not being available, Marshon Lattimore not being available, how they end up moving some of these guys into the slot. Opposing offenses move some of their wide receiver ones into the slot to purposely match them up with Justin Evans and take advantage of that matchup, stuff like that. The next option is Chris Harris Jr., who has the second most amount of snaps played in the slot for you so far this season at 38. The issue is that all three of his game day elevations have been used. So in order for the Saints to get him back out on the field this week, they're going to have to sign him to their active roster. Now, the Saints have had absolutely no qualms with like moving guys around and putting people in their practice squad, taking people off, elevating the active roster, cutting them, all these other things. They'll continue to move the roster around. So it's not a big ask to say, got to get Chris Harris Jr. on the roster if you want to play him in the slot. The issue is that on those 38 snaps, he's been targeted 8 times. He's allowed 72 yards on those receptions, along a 41. So that is worth considering that is a little bit inflated. No touchdowns, which is good. 104.2 passer rating. The last option is rookie cornerback Alontae Taylor, who had a fantastic outing last week against the Arizona Cardinals. He allowed only 1 catch on 5 targets for 17 yards, had a forced incompletion, drew a offensive pass interference in the end zone, ended 2 scoring drives, forcing a field goal in your own territory. He did really, really good work last week. The issue is that he did all of that work, the best of that work over on the outside, right? Not necessarily in the slot. And Alontae Taylor doesn't have a lot of slot snaps. I know a lot of folks immediately talk about, oh, we'll just put him in the slot. The thing is, he's got 5 slot snaps so far on the season. He was targeted twice, didn't allow a catch on either one of those, no forced incompletion on either one of those targets, according to Pro Football Focus. 39.6 passer rating, which is really good, but for a very, 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 very small sample size of only 5 snaps. And I know what you're thinking. Well, if he did it in college, he should be able to do it in the NFL. The thing is, he didn't do it in college. 31 snaps in the slot during his time at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. 2 targets, 2 catches allowed, 31 yards, no touchdowns, anything like that, but was targeted once back in 2019 in the slot, was targeted again back in 2021 in the slot, and that was it. So really, really small sample size when it comes to putting him in the slot. Now, the Saints, they put him there over the course of the offseason. He got some work there in training camp, all of that. So maybe the Saints have kind of helped develop that in him and feel good about doing that. And if that's the case, you trust them to make that decision. But based upon what we know, it's hard to make the decision to say you're maximizing Alontae Taylor by putting him in the slot, or on the reverse side, hard to say that you're maximizing the production you're going to get from the slot by putting somebody who hasn't really played there and who's been a pure outside corner the majority of his career, the majority of his life, basically his football life, in the slot. So for me, I'd roll with Evans to start. He's given up the worst passer rating. He's the only one that's given up a touchdown in the slot out of these 3. He's given up a 75% completion percentage and 165 yards. So why, Ross? Why go with Justin Evans? I like the matchup between him and Hunter Renfrow because I think you can use his physicality to your advantage. Hunter Renfrow is one of those guys that wants to be able to work very close to the line of scrimmage, which means you get to put hands on him, right? You get to work within 5 yards when you've got Hunter Renfrow lining up across from you. So you utilize your physicality going up against him. It also maximizes your depth, right? You get Chris Harris Jr. If you elevate him back to the active roster, then you can utilize him as the depth piece in the slot. You then get to hold on to Alontae Taylor as depth on the outside if Marshon Lattimore and Paulson Adebo are able to go. Now, the caveat to all of this, almost forgot that word, is that if Marshon Lattimore can't go, for instance, then you've got to start Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor on the outside. So that might change what you do on the inside. Maybe that does keep Chris Harris Jr. in the middle. Maybe that moves Chris Harris Jr. to the outside as depth and therefore forces you to go with Justin Evans in the slot. There's a couple of different ways that they can go. The one benefit of having Alontae Taylor in the slot, though, that I will mention, if the Saints do decide to go that way, which again would mostly be based upon what he's done in practice, away from the public eye than what he has done in the public eye, is that then when you have Davante Adams move into the slot, who has taken the second most slot, who has gotten the second most slot targets from the Raiders in the slot, when they move him in, you have a guy that has the capability of being physical enough and that shows absolutely no fear based upon what you saw with him going up against a future Hall of Famer in DeAndre Hopkins last week. You get him matched up on Davante Adams. Not a bad situation for you there based upon what we saw from him last week. So Couple of different ways that this can all go. We'll see how the New Orleans Saints work all of this out. But fingers crossed that they at least get Marshon Lattimore and Paulson Adebo back out on the field this weekend, which would be massively, massively helpful and impactful for what they're able to do over on the defensive side. Not only are they looking at potentially getting Marshon Lattimore and Paulson Adebo back this weekend, but they're also looking at potentially getting Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry back out on the field. And getting them both out on the field this weekend would be huge for the Saints. Let's break down how they would have impacted last week's game and what that means for what their impact could be, one or both, out on the field this weekend against the Raiders. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. And before we get to that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Watch me. Right now, I'm going to put in my Prize Picks entry just to prove to you how quick and easy this is, or you can just listen in. Either one's fine. Because all you got to do is pick 2 to 5 players and then choose whether or not to come in at more or less than their Prize Picks projection. So when I look at passing yards for the Saints and Raiders game, Derek Carr, 250.5 yards, more or less. I'm going to choose less. I think the Saints can get their defense back on track this week. Alvin Kamara, 63.5 rushing yards. Everything so far says that that's going to be more, so I'm going more. And then finally, when it comes to Chris Olave, 62.5 receiving yards for him. If he's the only receiver out there, if they can't get Michael Thomas or Jarvis Landry back out there, then this is an easy more. Bam, then I can submit this, and then I can win up to 10 times my deposit if I get all 3 of these right. You can maximize that by going up to 5 different players as well. You get all of them right and you get a big payout. It's that simple. That's it. That's all that it took for me to potentially win big this weekend. So if you want to go and check it out, and if you're a first-time user, you can also get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 by simply using the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON. So if you put down $100, let's say, that means that Prize Picks is going to give you $100. If you put down $50, they're going to give you $50. Nice and simple. Don't forget to enter that promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON, at sign up so that you can get that instant deposit match of up to $100. That is at prizepicks.com or with the Prize Picks app today. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints by taking a look at, for our Film Watch Wednesday, our film breakdown here, how Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry changed the Saints offense, getting one or both of these guys back this weekend. So remember we talked last week on Friday in terms of in our game plan on how to beat the Arizona Cardinals, that you'd have to run some of those cover 1, cover 3 beaters and win those matchups. Verticals, for instance, which kind of stretches that safety in the middle of the field. Oh, do I take the one that's hitting the seam on the left side? Do I take the one that's running the seam on the right side? And whichever one that safety doesn't go to, that's usually where you're able to throw the ball. Think back to how Taysom Hill hit Adam Troutman over the middle because the safety went right. He was coming across the field, crossing to the left, easy completion down the field. The next thing is, the levels concepts, the flood concepts, where you get one player going to the flat underneath, you get another player hitting the intermediate, like maybe an out route or a drag or a dig, or not a dig, sorry, an out route or a drag, or, a corner or something like that. And then you have somebody else that's pushing vertically deep. So pushing vertically, or maybe even running one of those corner routes to the outside, to the outside as well. Excuse me. So that way you get 3 options. You have one player in the short, one player in the intermediate, one player out deep. So if there's a flat defender, for instance, that's getting a lot of depth and it's taking away the intermediate receiver, then you go to the one in the short, which would usually be like Alvin Kamara in the flat. If that flat defender is playing down too much and the linebacker or a corner that's over the top of the intermediate route is getting too much depth and it's taking away the deep, then you have the intermediate route to go to. And then, of course, if you just get lost deep, then you get to take advantage. Or if the defense gets lost deep, then you get to take advantage of that. So the Saints ran a lot of those concepts. They took advantage of some, others they weren't necessarily able to take advantage of. I'm going to tell you this much. Not throwing the ball to a wide open Alvin Kamara is not a single quarterback problem. It is a quarterback problem for the New Orleans Saints, because there are several examples, including the pick 6 on Isaiah Simmons, where Alvin Kamara is wide open in the flat. Now we have to take into account things like I always say, throwing windows and, line of sight and stuff like that we can see it on film. The quarterback might not be able to see it on the field, all of that. But there are several examples of Alvin Kamara just waving his hand, saying I'm open in the flat, and not being able to take advantage of that. So that's one of the ways actually that having the presence of a Michael Thomas or a Jarvis Landry helps to kind of create more of those opportunities. We'll start off with Michael Thomas. If you run those verticals, all of a sudden the safety is going to end up heavily playing over to the side that wide receiver is playing, that Michael Thomas is playing. Therefore, it opens up opportunities on the opposite side of the field for you to be able to take advantage. The other thing is that it forces, if he's running intermediate, forces some of those linebackers to play with a little bit more depth. You get to take advantage of what's underneath. Or Alvin Kamara threatens those linebackers, pulls those linebackers down, then you get to take advantage of Michael Thomas over the intermediate area. With Jarvis Landry's hands, you probably don't have, running a drag route across the field, an issue like what we saw with Marquez Callaway, to where bounced off of him and then into the hands of Marco Wilson, who was lost on the route, was trailing, but had the ball bounce his way and was able to take that in for a pick six. So that ends up also saving you from handing Marco Wilson a touchdown, and also NFC Defensive Player of the Week, which he was honored this week. Now, you look at getting both of those players back. What's the kind of benefit to getting them both there? Well, it's the attention that you draw from safeties, the attention that you draw from corners, which ends up stretching defenses laterally, allows you a little bit more kind of leeway in the run game, lighter boxes, things like that. But the other piece of it is that both of them have Chris Olave's ability of not only running with the scramble drill, but also finding open holes in the zone. The issue is that the Raiders play man coverage about twice as often as the Arizona Cardinals do. But the good news on top of that is that Olave, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, all very good at working off of press and getting open against man coverage as well, because they love to run with both of these guys, or all three of these guys, these sort of long developing crossing the field routes, which ends up allowing you to create natural separation from your defender because you're literally just running away from them. That's really what you're doing, right? When you're coming across the field, you're just running away from that defender. So that's good news in terms of how the Saints could match up if they got one or both of these guys back, along with Chris Olave, who has the long speed to really be able to take advantage of that. Here's the last piece. Solid perimeter blockers from both of these players. And the Raiders are dealing with some injuries in the secondary. One of the things you always hear when it comes to injuries in the secondary is go out there and test them in the passing game. But you also get to test them in the run game, especially if they're on the perimeter, because your starting corners have a lot more experience, reps, all of that, in defending the run on the perimeter. These backup guys don't have that kind of experience. So if you have good perimeter blockers like the Saints do with Jarvis Landry, with Michael Thomas, add to that Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith, who are very good perimeter blockers as well, and Taysom Hill, who you can put over on the outside or have him be a lead blocker for you, then all of a sudden you're testing that injured secondary, not just in the air, but you also get to test them on the ground, which may be even more effective in terms of the long game strategy of controlling the clock, putting together long drives, and hopefully finishing in the end zone, which is the last piece. Once again, the New Orleans Saints, this time 60% in the red zone against the Arizona Cardinals. One of those was a turnover in the red zone. Bad decision by Andy Dalton. Can't have that. No wide receiver is going to save you from that. But maybe having a Michael Thomas gives you the opportunity to say, all right, well, at least I'm going for Michael Thomas there, or something like that. Or you get the opportunity to go somewhere else as opposed to throwing over the middle in a cover 3 look, which made no sense at all. So again, easy for us to see on film, hard to see out on the field, but you now get to take advantage of these guys in the red zone a little bit, because you look at the 3 touchdowns that Michael Thomas has scored so far this season, all red zone touchdowns. You look at the 2 touchdowns that Chris Olave has scored so far this season, both red zone touchdowns. So now you get that level too, to where not only are you opening the defense up, stretching the defense, and allowing you to be able to take advantage of things through the passing game and in the run game because of these receivers and how they contribute in stretching that defense, how they contribute as blockers to putting together the long drives. You get to cap them off in the end zone as well, which is something the New Orleans Saints need to do badly. So there are a lot of big names to keep an eye out on when it comes to the injury report for the New Orleans Saints. Saints back at practice later on today. We will make sure you have all the information that you need in terms of injuries and how it's all tracking and progressing here throughout the week. Once again, I appreciate you so much for making Locked On Saints your first listen today. Tomorrow, your boy Q and I are going to be linking up here for our crossover Thursday episode from the Locked On Raiders podcast to make sure that we're breaking down everything that you need to know about this weekend's matchup, how the Saints can win, how much the Saints need to win this game. We're going to break it all down on Thursday. Until then, make sure you also go and check out that Locked On Sports Today podcast as your second listen today. You're going to get everything that you need from the world of sports, including the biggest sports stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and of course, the take of the day, which you get every day as well, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. I appreciate y'all so much for tuning in today. Don't forget, do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Doesn't do anyone any harm, but certainly helps me out a ton. So I appreciate all of the help and support here on the channel. Thank you very much, as always, for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.